All right, come back together. Share a little bit about what things you reflected on. Did anyone, how many of you found that you, in the last year, have done something that's by way of direct service with others?
Yeah.
Raise your hand. School type. Okay. Somebody want to give an example of what you were thinking of?
I'd say encouraging my nieces and nephews, my daughter and my family would use it.
So you encourage
encourage them to.
Now, did you pass on any of the things that you had to?
I did, of course.
All right.
Yes.
So there you are. Good example.
Yes.
Reaching the needs of those who have need for clothing. So you're close to the heart of the matter.
Yes.
Did anyone find that they have in the past year done anything by way of education or prayer that would be for justice? Raise your hand. None of you, some of the others of you didn't ever pray for justice? Anyone want to give an example?
I'm not going to raise my hand.
That guy who's opening the lap dancing club in Parnell Street in Peter Street this year, I raised that issue with a lot of people in conversation as a form of sex trade and, you know,
So you're really consciousness raising?
Yes.
Good, good. Anyone else?
We've sent petitions to our ministers and
No,
teachers.
you're in another level. You're still at the prayer level, the prayer, the education, the awareness. You get another chance.
Well, I just would like to share this, that when you were coming to Ireland first, it was we heard it was the 10th of December and it was such a short visit. A lot of people said, oh, we could never organise a group or, at that stage. And I'm just to say that I just can't get over the group that's here today with a little bit of organisation and that it's well worth it.
I hope you say so by the end of the afternoon. But certainly in terms of the numbers, it's very gratifying. Rita.
And to organise a Justice and Peace Conference.
Have you prayed for anything related to justice in the last year?
Yes.
Projects or like when the tsunami occurred?
Yes.
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 Well, I would include them in my prayers.
The Pakistani earthquake?
Yes.
Good. Now, this one. That you're teaching others how to develop the skills that they need in order to provide services for others. So it's just a little bit farther removed. Anyone have an example of that?
Campaigning for the millennium rights, the millennium goals really. We had an exhibition in the hotel for school children as well. We were both part of that where we gave out information and we've spoken to our associates and our different communities.
So you're right, part of it is this level, but the letter writing, is that for national or is that for local?
National level.
National level. So a little bit of both. Anybody at the protest yesterday?
Yes.
And what level would that one be? The national level that you're working with. Anyone do anything at the international level? Anybody else?
Letter writing with Amnesty. Letter writing with Amnesty.
Yeah.
I do letter writing for Amnesty.
Good. And it usually would be prisoners of,
Yes.
that you're writing to another government to request release of a prisoner, conscience or whatever. Yes. Very good. Okay, and I'm sure you are aware, in the past, the Jubilee campaign for the cancellation of debt, you were probably involved in that. And then for any of you, I don't know if Ireland is involved in the Women's March, the International Women's March, if they've been involved in that. Different countries have different levels of trauma. But in any case, I think you're all great justice people. You can see that you know, within this room, many of you have done things on many levels. But I think it's a good metaphor to show that we can all work for justice, no matter where we are or what we're doing. We can find ourselves somewhere in here and be part of working for justice in the world. And I think our conviction is that we need people working at all levels.
Try going back to this.
All right, my hope this afternoon is the first thing I'd like to do is to tell you a little bit more about Unanima International, how it came to be. This is probably a big review for some of you and maybe not quite so much for others. Then to be a little more specific about how we work at the United Nations. Then to take, to have you do a little more buzzing about any questions you might want to raise. And then I can go a little more deeply into some of the examples of the projects that we're particularly working on right now. Does that sound okay? Here's Anna. I want to make sure I'm following instructions. All right, I think that Margaret, gave you a very good first word about that. How many of you have really heard quite a bit about Unanima International, so you feel like you have some sense of what it's all about? Okay, so we've got a good number. And I'll go through this rather quickly then. I think you know that our organization, let's see if I can do something with this as well, was founded, became, I think you would call it a charity, a new charity, in 2002, June of 2002. We actually came together as a result of my putting out the word, as Margaret said, about whether or not there were other small congregations like my own that were interested in doing work for international justice through the United Nations, which, while it isn't perfect, is the most democratic of the international institutions that we have, because every nation which is a member, and there are 191, has a voice and a vote, unlike some of the other institutions where the G7 or the G8 or the G24 have really controlling kind of power. At that time, 7 religious communities of women responded, yes, we're interested. We want to see if this sort of thing is something that we would commit to, because we know we've got the intuition that we want to work at this level. So the 7 communities came together in December of 2001. We managed to get ourselves a budget, a mission statement, a name, and the requirements in terms of personnel that we would need to make this project go. Because we knew that if we went back to our leadership teams and we didn't have that kind of detail, they wouldn't be able to say yes or no to the idea. Now, I don't know how many of you have spent hours developing mission statements, but we managed to do it in a day. And I was very amazed. But I think the reason that we did it so quickly is because every single community had such common threads that we were concerned about. It was very easy to pull those together once everybody said what they were and come up with a mission statement. And I think that really is itself is a sign from God that this is work that needs doing. And on the brochure that you have, inside the front cover, where it says who we are, that's really our mission statement. And you'll see that we decided that we would be for congregations of women religious and their partners in ministry, associates, or whatever they're called in the different communities. And we would work at the United Nations in 3 areas. We would work on behalf of women and children living in situations of poverty, immigrants and refugees, and welfare of the planet. Sounds like good stuff. And I expected rather, that the Brigidine, they also felt that that fit their charism, because even though they came in a little bit later, you came in a little bit later, you identified with it as being resonating with your charism as well, and your concerns for justice at the present time. I'm sorry this runs on battery, or I could have had it up before, but I didn't want it to run out in the middle. But that number of issues, the 3 issue areas, women and children in poverty, welfare of the planet, immigrants and refugees, is too much for the staff that we have to really be able to do it effectively. So we decided that we would need to have a narrower action focus, one that we could really implement in a way that was effective and got some action done. And what we decided for that, and this was our board members, which was one of the persons from each of the congregations and myself as the coordinator, was under the umbrella of violence against women, we would take particularly the focus of trafficking in women and children as our action focus. We started with that action focus in 2002, and we said for 3 years, 2002 through 2005, we would use that. And then we would do it, then we renewed it at our last meeting in January of last year, or this year rather. I'm almost there. There we go. Okay. So we still continue with that as our particular action focus. But meanwhile, we did not start out with accreditation from the United Nations, which meant that we really were not able to speak there in our own name. We started out working under the auspices of Franciscans International, so anytime we did anything, we had to be Franciscans. Now, Franciscans are lovely people, and they have good good things that they're working for, but we wanted to be able to have the freedom to choose the things that we particularly wanted with the emphasis we wanted. So we continue to try and get our own accreditation at the United Nations. And this last July of 2005, after, you have to be incorporated for 2 years as an organization before you can apply. So we applied in 2004. There was a backlog. That was considered in 2005, and the first time it was considered, we were accepted. So we now have our own special consultative status with the United Nations, and that means that we can have access to the government representatives, that we now have the right to speak in our own name, Unanima International, that we can do educational events that are open for the entire UN community. In short, it gives us kind of the positioning now so that we can carry out in our own name the work for justice as we want to do it. And where does that mean we can do this? Well, one place is at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And as you see that picture there, it says it's 60 years since the United Nations Charter was signed in 1945. And you can imagine there's been a few changes in this world since 1945. I expect many of you in this room were alive and remember 1945.
somewhat in any case. I think I don't remember it much, but in any case, I do know. And one of the things, the way the charter starts, it says, "We the peoples united," and the idea is never again the same kind of war that had already occurred in the first half of the 20th century. But if you think about that for a minute, who were those nations at that time? They were the winners of the Second World War. So the structures of the United Nations that were designed at that time favored the positions and the countries that were the winners in 1945. So there does need to be a little bit of reconfiguration here. And that's one of the reasons the United Nations is trying to work on reform this year, with some not always great success. One of the bodies of the United Nations that I think you're aware of is the General Assembly. This is the part of the United Nations where every one of the 191 nations has a voice and a vote. That doesn't make them all equal, of course, but at least they all have a vote. And it seems to me, and it has seemed to me on occasion when I've seen it happen, that when a group of nations form a coalition, they are effective in terms of blocking an action or moving an action forward, even against, regrettably, my country. Not regrettably that they are able to do something, but I'm so sorry that my country is such a difficult, well, not a world citizen, shall we say. Then there's the Security Council, and that does need reform. As you know, there are 15 members in the Security Council at any one time. 5 are permanent, and 10 are elected on the basis of geographical region as rotating members. And the 5 permanent definitely reflect who were the winners at the end of the Second World War. So we have the UK, we have the USA, France, China, and Russia that have the permanent memberships and the veto. And one of the items on the discussion right now is the reform of the Security Council. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it will go far, partly because there is agreement that the permanent membership should be expanded. I think almost all of them agree on that. What they don't want, of course, is to give the veto to anyone else. And then in the details, there's always the devil, right? It's a question of to whom would permanent membership be expanded. The US has said, well, Japan would be okay with us, but the other Asian nations aren't quite so excited about Japan having a permanent seat. India has put itself forward as another possibility in the Asian nations. Pakistan is not excited about that, and several of the other Asian nations are not as well. In Latin America, Brazil has said, we're willing, but you don't hear cries of acclamation from the other Latin American nations. In Africa, Egypt was mentioned. The countries of sub-Saharan Africa are not at all interested in having Egypt represent Africa as a permanent member. Nigeria has said, choose us. And the rest of the sub-Saharan nations aren't excited about that either. So as a result of all this, political kind of jockeying around, it does not look likely that anything much is going to happen with the Security Council for a bit of time in any case. They're also talking about expanding the temporary membership so that the total membership of the Security Council would be 25 instead of 15. We only have to hope that if they can get some sort of suggestion out there, we might at one time or other begin to pressure our national governments to support a Security Council model that would be more effective than the present one.